All right, all right, all right. What is going on, everybody? Hello, Matt. DF Nuked. What is going on, guys? All right, everybody. Real quick, you guys know the drill. Welcome, everybody, to Pixologic stream. My name is Ian. I am a digital artist and 3D sculptor over at Funko, and I make toys for a living. Today, we are going to be covering how I prep things for 3D prints. There's a million different ways to do that with inside of ZBrush, but at the end of the day, hopefully you guys take away something from this, and feel free to ask questions. If you're not subscribed to the Twitch or YouTube or Facebook or Instagram or pretty much any place Pixologic would be, why aren't you? Go do that real quickly, and then that way you'll be notified when everybody goes live. So that being said, let's get into it. Let's do it. What is going on, everybody? Hey, Ryan, how you doing? My digital one, what is up? Jack, how you doing? What's going on, guys? So yeah, so today I thought we're gonna do two things. One is what you see here is what you're gonna get, and that is 100% correct. I'm going to be prepping this for 3D print, and then I'm going to give it away for all of you guys for being so awesome, so just supportive, and I want you guys to have something kind of cool that you can put on your desk. So you're going to go ahead and we're going to prep this for 3D print, and then probably sometime this week I will verify the files, at least make sure they're watertight, and then I'm going to go ahead and release them. I don't have time this week to test print them. Usually I would, and I do recommend that. But as long as we do our job right today, they should print without a problem. So, Scorpion Core Universe! Hey, how's your day going? My day's going really well. I was in kind of a funk a little bit, but at the end of the day, you just kind of like take a deep breath and you just do what you can do. So, some days are great, some days are meh, but you know what? I always get to sculpt, so I'm happy. That's plain as it can get. So, let's get into it. Let's put my handy dandy glove on. And yes, also too, guys, please let me know if you guys experience any lag issues, because I had to clean out my system, do a bunch of driver wipes, and then reinstall some stuff. So hopefully these settings are acting pretty well. But let's do it. Yeah, man, yeah. Okay, so first things first, when planning to 3D print your pieces, it's always important to kind of see how you can break them up so that they're manageable pieces, and then kind of figure out what size you would like to print it at. I generally like to print relatively decent size, plus I have small machines, so my go-to range is anywhere between 6 inches to 8 inches, or about, 1/8 scale, give or take. So that's what we're going to focus on today. I'm going to show you how we're going to start that. What is up, Carbon? 44444. How you doing, buddy? So what I like to do first is let's go through all of our parts, and let's start combining things and taking things away that we don't need. First things first is we're going to solo this out. So this sword, let's see here. This whole sword component, we need to merge this all together. So we're going to go ahead and turn off everything else. And we're going to go ahead and just merge the sword together. But before we do that, actually, what we need to do is make sure dynamic is not turned on at all. I use dynamic symmetry a lot. So if you do too, make sure they're not on. So the best way we can do that is go to our geometry tab, kind of focus on dynamic subdivision, hit Shift F to turn on your polyframe, and just start pushing down on the keyboard. And that's going to go through your subtool selection. So you don't need to constantly come up here, hold Shift, open this up, and press through. We're just going to go ahead and hit down on the keyboard. And as you can see, it's going to select the next subtool. I know I don't need this one because it's already hidden, so we'll delete that. Let's close that, open up geometry, and then let's focus right here. Shift M. Make sure that this isn't lit. So we're going to go ahead and push down. Got some subdivisions there, that's good. Down. Okay, that's at lowest subdivision. We can increase that to the highest. Okay, and that's it for this. So we have subdivisions, no dynamic subdivision. So we are good to go, that we can go ahead, click this little cogwheel, and hit merge folder. And it's just going to merge everything into the same thing. Bloop. Now we have our one subtool with everything attached to it right here, which is perfect. So that's the first part. Let's go ahead and save as, and let's open a new folder. We'll call this the Master Sword, and we'll call this 3D Print Rep. And I like to rename my subtools just like any other project, 01, 02, 03, just in case I make a mistake, I can always go back. Hey man, how you doing? How is the new job? New job is great. Everything's good there. I'm doing pretty well today. Was a little in a funky mood, but I'm pretty good right now. So, you know, I can't complain. I'm doing great. I get to sculpt. Okay, so 3D print. Call this prep and 01. We'll go ahead and save that. That way, we can go ahead and do things like delete this entire folder now that we know it's done. So let's go ahead and do that. Always be careful. That's why you save before you delete. Made that mistake. Painted dragon. Hey, hey, hey! How you doing, my friend? How you doing? Oops. Save as. Just go ahead and delete and save that. Perfect. Now, the other thing, too, to notice is this first subtool. We need to actually put something in its place. I'm actually going to insert a cube. I'm going to push that up. Then I'm going to go ahead and save as. Because the first subtool always takes the ZTL name as its subtool name. So I like to have a tool there that's hidden. And then this way I can actually call my objects what they are, where this is the Master Sword. And that way nothing gets confusing. Okay, let's turn off the Master Sword and let's go into the Silent Princess. Now, the Silent Princess, this flower is going to be very interesting to print because it's naturally small and thin. And anytime you have small, thin parts, you got to be careful on how you're going to print it and if it's even going to be printable. And we can establish all of that when we actually establish a scale. For right now, the scale is set to ZBrush default, which is basically like 2 millimeters. So there's no way of really measuring it without setting a scale, at least accurately. So we're going to go ahead and just kind of get this flower merged together, and then we'll worry about scale and thickness afterwards. So same thing, we're going to go ahead, close down the subtool, and we're going to turn on polyframe, you can kind of see, and we're looking to make sure that dynamic subdivision is not turned on. Because if it is, we just have to accept the subdivision. So let's push down. Oh, there it is. Dynamic is turned on. We'll go ahead and apply it. So now you see that I have a subdivision of 3. Let's go through, just making sure that is turned on. So let's apply it. Okay, perfect. So all of that looks good. We're going to do the exact same thing. It's very repetitive. Just check your subdivisions, make sure it's all the way you would like it, and then go ahead and merge that folder. And now we have this right there. We're going to go ahead and rename this as the Silent Princess. And let me know if I'm going too fast. I will stop and ask, and answer all those questions. Very cool. All right. So I'm going to go ahead. I saved it first. Now I'm going to go ahead and delete this folder. Perfect. Now we're going to do the same thing with the Korok character. Here he is in all of his glory. And we're going to go through. Luckily, he's only 2 pieces. It was really, really simple. I kept that as minimal as possible. So, not really too concerned there. Kamara! What is happening? All right. Perfect. Looks good. Let's go ahead and save as. I'm going to save this now as a version 2. Because I'm getting too comfortable with myself. So, we want to make sure that we stay true and honest. Korok. Just call him the Korok character. There we go. Perfect. And then this last part right here is the actual pedestal or stand. So we'll just call this the base. Because why not? Simplify it. We don't have to go too crazy. Hey, what's up, Odon? It's going pretty good, man. It's going pretty good. Can't complain. I cannot complain. And if I could, you wouldn't want to hear it anyway. I have my printer printing its first test piece, and so far I don't smell anything. Fume hood for the win, hopefully. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Just do yourself a favor. Until you know that you're printing without any fume leaks, don't hit print and go to bed. You know, you don't want to be, since you're very close to everything, you don't want to be sleeping and have there an accidental leak. So make sure you really test it before you get comfortable. But that's awesome. I cannot wait to see your first test piece. And hopefully you'll be printing this when I give this away today. So let's do that. Actually, you know what? While we're streaming, because I have a feeling this is going very fast, while we're streaming, I just might go ahead and package it up and get it ready to ship out to you guys. So let's do that. All right. So there we go. So now we have our 4 pieces. We have our Master Sword, our Silent Princess, our Korra character, and our base, which is awesome. Hello, Mac Grimium. Mike Grimrune? Grimrune? Is that how you say it? Hello, how you doing? Hey. All right. So do we have any questions so far about just making sure how you merge your pieces before we move on? Hey, ship it so early in the stream. Yeah, exactly. I'm confident, dude. I'm very confident. I do this for a living, so hopefully, hopefully I would have a little bit of insight on how we get this done. One of those days. One of those days. You guys want to see what I'll start sculpting if we finish this suit early? Because I think you guys will like it. I think it'll be fun. But, all right. Now, what we're going to be doing is setting scale. This is where I know a lot of people can get lost pretty quickly. I'm going to try to explain it as simple as possible. But setting scale is all about just getting a decent reference and something to always account for, and then we'll be good to go. So we're going to come all the way down the bottom, and we're going to insert a cube 3D, just like we did in the top, except for this one is going to be our 1 inch scale. Okay? This is going to be what we're going to set it up as, and we're going to manipulate just this cube. So I'm going to hit transparency so we can see our object, and I'm going to scale this down. I'm going to set this at the bottom. Okay. Now I said in the beginning that I'm looking for about like 6, 7, 8 inches, give or take. So let's kind of fall in the middle and go on 7. And I don't have a scale with me. Doesn't matter. Okay. So let's go ahead and scale this down. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to hit this little pen icon. Okay. So we're going to rely on a couple things. So we're going to hit the pen icon, and we're going to use 1 on the keyboard. And what 1 does, if anybody's curious, is it repeats the very last thing you did from a like a zoom to a turn. Just hit 1, it'll just repeat that zoom, or even a duplicate of an item. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to zoom in here a little bit, say right about there. I'm going to hold control. Let's actually solo this out so you can see it better. I'm going to hold control, and I'm going to drag this up and kind of set it on top of the other cube as accurately as possible. You don't have to get super pedantic or OCD about it. You could get as close as possible. You know, it's really just kind of setting everything up for success. So you can get as technical as you want, but you really don't have to. So once we have this here, this is now 2 cubes. I'm going to start counting out by hitting 1 on the keyboard. 3, 4, 5, 6. So that gives me 6, so let's go 7. Okay. And so what that did was just, it made the same stroke, and it kept stacking it on top. This way I know that each cube is the same distance from the next one as the very first one I duplicated. Once we're satisfied with that, I'm I'm going to hit that little pen again. I'm going to clear my mask. I'm going to come here to poly groups and hit auto groups. I think I want to put a little tap light inside my fume hood. I can't see anything in there. Yeah, get some LED strips. That would work out great for you. Okay, and look at that. Actually, that's pretty close to what we want. I'll just scale it up just a little bit. Look at that. That's 7 cubes tall, which is perfect. That's about what I want it to be. Got a little bit of space in between each cube, but again, you can get as accurate as you want by going in there and moving each cube to be on top of each other, or this works too. I have same headsets now. I just need same modeling skills and life solve. I feel it, right? Okay. Now we got this. What we're gonna do now is I'm gonna go ahead and just select the bottom cube again, and I'm gonna go ahead and delete the rest. The reason why we stacked them was to get an idea of how many cubes tall that would be, because we're gonna set this to 1 inch, and we get to manipulate that cube. So if this was like all the way up here, then we would, quote, scale it down to fit the size of our model, and then we just need the 1 cube now to set it up for success. So we'll touch that cube right there by holding Control Shift and tapping, and then we're gonna come over here to modify topology and delete hidden. So now we just have the 1 cube that we can set our entire scale on. So we're gonna come up here to Z plugin, come all the way down to Scale Master. And the very first thing I like to do is hit Set Scene Scale, because right now ZBrush thinks that everything's 1 millimeter. But in actuality, ZBrush actually is not. So if I were to set this right here, it's now looking at 0.46 millimeters for this cube size. And that's okay. I'm going to be sticking in millimeters, because even though I'm writing this down as a 1 inch scale, millimeters is the most accurate and your best friend when it comes to 3D printing, since most 3D print slicers and printers function in the millimeter or in the metric system. So we're going to stick with that. So we're going to hit millimeters. Now I'm going to come back up to Z plugin, and I'm now going to pick one of these axes, and I'm just going to type in 25.4 millimeters. That is the equivalent to 1 inch. And then I'm just going to go ahead and say Resize subtool, which is going to resize everything based on this one subtool into its proper scale according to this 1 inch. So I'm going to go ahead and hit that, and it's going to do its black magic while we take a sip of water. Yeah, I really like this headset. So I'm glad you do too. All right. And we get an error. Yay, that's beautiful. Great, wonderful. So if you get an error, that's where you come back and you open up the file. And we basically redo this part again. So let's do that again. That will happen sometimes. So let's come in here. Let's copy our 1 inch cube. Let's paste this in there. Let's rename this base. And let's try again. Okay, let's look at this for a second. Let's come here to this one. So sometimes this happens with the rescaling. Not quite sure why, but if it happens, it's okay. Reload your file. That's why we save before anything else. Reload your file. And then start over. So let's go ahead and actually scale this back down. Oops. Whoopsies. There we go. And we'll try this again. Okay. I installed, Marmor said, uninstalled, and tried reinstalling the library of textures. Nil anyhow. Ooh. Oh man. I've had crazy driver issues recently that made me reinstall everything. So it's not fun, I feel you there. Hey, it's this guy again. Good to see you. Hey, how are you doing, Blitz? Welcome in, welcome in. So let's try this again. So let's go ahead and actually come down here to the old file that had this kind of corrupt version for whatever reason. We'll go ahead and delete all because we don't need that. And we'll come into this one and let's try it again. See, right when I said things were moving smoothly, ZBrush is like, hey, what's happening? So we're going to do that again. I'm going to hit the pin. I'm going to drag this up so we get close to where we want it. 1 on the keyboard, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm going to go ahead and scale that down. It's like such. Get that so it's pretty close to where we want it. Yes, yes. Very good. Very nice. Very nice. Let's go ahead and save as because polygroups, auto groups. Tap that bad boy right there. Geometry and delete hidden. I'm actually going to send this home because maybe that had something to do with it. It's possible. Try something new. I'm going to go ahead and resave it one more time. Z plugin. I'm going to go ahead and set scene scale. We're going to say millimeters at 0.47. Please be kind to us. And turn off transparency. I'm going to go to Z plugin. Type in 25.4 millimeters. Nope, that's 25.4 millimeters. There we go. And we're going to go ahead and hit Resize subtool. Please be kind. If this error pops up, it's okay. Just hit OK. A lot of times that error will pop up and it'll still do the resizing. There we go. Whee! Let's go ahead and type this as 03. I'm going to call this resized. Not reseized, resized. There we go. Are you mostly on Sundays? Yes, I am. I'm here most Sundays at 5 p.m., so around this time. And I go for about 3 hours. Sometimes a little longer, depending on the project. And because usually nobody streams after me. But I like to check that sometimes. But usually I go for 3 hours and I'm on Sunday. Some of you who follow me on my own personal Twitch and YouTube channel, I'm actually not able to stream as often anymore, which is a little bit of a bummer. So you guys can always find me here and every week, and it's going to be awesome. I'm watching Gamara. I can't help thinking that Gamara is a much cooler creature than Godzilla. There, I said it. He did. He said it, guys. He said it. All right. Now that we have this cube, how we want. So now everything, all the scaling is based off of this cube. So if we go back to Z plugin and hit set scene scale, you'll now see that we have 25.4 millimeter for this cube. We're going to go ahead and accept that. And now we know that this is set to that 25.4 millimeter, which means everything in the scene is now also set to that. So we can actually verify some of this by hitting this Master Sword, for example, going to solo, and then we can go set scene scale, and you can see that it's 56 by 147 by 17 millimeters, which is perfect. So we can always verify and hit set scene scale and say, oh yeah. Just remember too, anytime you use a set scene scale, if you hit accept by clicking one of those measurements, that's the scene. You know, while it's equivalent to this cube, that is what it's going to read each time. So I choose a cube because it's perfectly cubed. So all the dimensions are equal on all sides, all 6 sides. So that's why I choose a cube to set the scene scale. Because sometimes if you come here to like this Korok guy, and then you hit set scene scale, and you're like, okay, great. Well, 55 by 69 by 35 might be a little difficult for some people to wrap their heads around. I know sometimes for me, I have a hard time being like, well, what is that? But if I know what 25.4 is, so I just base everything off of that. It's just easier for me to wrap my head around, but whatever's convenient and works for you guys. Do I speak Spanish? I do not speak Spanish. I'm really, really sorry. However, if you're comfortable in Spanish, what you can do is ask your question, and I will use Google Translate to read your question so I could try to answer as best I can. I know that's not always the best way to do it, but that is definitely, that is one way I can try to answer your question as much as possible. Why resize on ZBrush instead of resize in the slicer software? So, great question. The reason why you want to resize in ZBrush is because you're going to have the most control over it. A slicer, while you can rescale, the thing is that you can't control the wall thickness, you can't control how thin or thick something might be, and that's crucial with 3D printing. So here in ZBrush, let's say I have a hollowed part and I scale it down, I can fix that. Whereas if I have a hollowed part inside of, let's say, Prusia slicer, when I put it in there and then I size it down, it's going to scale everything down. So that wall thickness is going to get thinner, and then it might get to a point where it's unprintable, which is very possible. So sizing in ZBrush will give you more control of the end product than if you rely on just exporting it out and then using something else to size it. That doesn't mean there aren't other programs that could do that efficiently, but for me and my workflow, it's highly recommended to size it in ZBrush so that you have ultimate control, and maybe hollow in another program. Although sometimes I have hollowed in ZBrush if I absolutely want those controls. So it really is up to you, but at the end of the day, the other thing to remember is that if you have specific key cuts that are just, like, I would call them tight tolerances, like, maybe it's like plus or minus, 10 thousandths of an inch. When you resize in another program, those key cuts may or may not work because of, again, that same thing where the shrinking comes down or the expanding. Usually blowing something up, you'll have an easier time fitting something because usually those things will open up. But when you're scaling it down specifically, that's when you start running into problems. And the smaller something is, the tiniest little, like, sharp edge that you don't see could make a part not fit correctly. So it's a good way to control everything and make sure that your parts fit the way you intend them out of ZBrush. So hopefully that answers your question. Okay. So now we have this. Now we're going to start making sure that our stuff is watertight. But first, one of the big concerns I want to talk about is actually measuring for size in ZBrush, and that is this flower right here. So the Silent Princess is probably the most crucial and delicate part within this whole thing. So we want to measure the tiniest spots and see if they're going to need to be blown up a little bit to fit the needs of what we want. Should be become a pro sculpting on ZBrush before you start? Okay, should you become a pro sculptor on ZBrush before you start to be a streamer? So it depends on what you're wanting to stream your work as. I started out as a streamer to kind of just share my journey as an artist, and from there I ended up wanting to teach. So you can start your stream however you want. Just be honest with where you're at, and yeah, there's nothing wrong in starting a stream. I don't think you need to become a professional. No, I think you just need to make it your own and just be honest about where you're at as an artist and just enjoy the process. No, it's okay. It's totally fine. Yeah, it makes total sense. Thanks for the answer. Not a problem. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to measure the thinnest part of this entire thing, and it is not the leaves. If you look at the leaves, how I designed them, there's a thin to thick to thin part to it. So it's thin on the edges, then it gets pretty thick here. Let's go ahead and turn on double so you can see a little bit better. So display properties, double. So you can see that it's pretty thin here, but it thickens up really quickly, then goes back to thin. That's a purposeful design choice. So it comes here. So it's thin at this edge, but that's nothing. Like that shape is going to print perfectly fine. So we don't have to worry about that. What we have to worry about is how thick this part is right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to measure that now. Now that we set C and scale, we can actually measure this. And the best way to do that, in my opinion, is using the transpose tool. So if we hit W on our keyboard, which will bring up our gizmo, and hit Y, that's going to bring up our transpose. Now what we can do is basically pay attention to this spot right up here at the top left corner. Hopefully you guys can see that. It says right now on this wide just adjustment, that's going to give us our measurement, and it's going to give it in millimeters. So I'm going to go ahead and start pulling out the transpose. I'm going to hold shift, which is going to make sure it's a straight line from point A to point B. And I'm going to go ahead and kind of bring that out right there. And our measurement is 0.56 millimeters. So it is pretty thin. When your average wall thickness on, let's say, an FDM printer is about 0.2 millimeter, so it's double than that. So because I'm going to print this in resin, this may not be that big of an issue. However, it could cause problems later. So we can do one of two things. We can either just scale this up a little bit, or we can select those individuals and scale those up a little bit, and then re-sculpt it to be appealing, and that way we know it's thick enough. Or what we can do, I'm going to go ahead and quickly just isolate these. So when you merge, usually your polygroups are pretty well auto-grouped, but we're going to hit auto-groups again just to make sure. You can use the select rec, and I'm going to just isolate these guys right here. And I'm actually going to split hidden for just a temporary thing. So let's go to splits, and because they're subdivisions, split hidden, we can drop it down. All right, perfect. When you have subdivisions, ZBrush now allows you to split hidden with subdivisions if you drop it to its lowest subdivision. At its highest subdivision, it will not let you do that. So just a little heads up. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to go back to Deformation. We're going to go down to Deformation, not back to. We haven't done it yet. I'm actually going to just inflate this a little bit. I'm going to inflate it by... Let's go 1. Let's see what that does. So again, I'm going to isolate that 1. These are all about the same. Turn gizmo back on. Start here, holding shift. Scaling here. And about 0.7 millimeter. That's a lot better and a lot more comfortable in my opinion. And I think that will print pretty well. We can even just go on the safe side and go like maybe another 0.2 inflate. Let's measure it one more time. So W, we have the transpose tool. Come across an edge. 0.77. Let's go another 0.25. Try it one more time. That's not a good measurement. Let's zoom in. Let's get that edge. Get that point right there. Okay, 0.8. I like that. That's a lot better. There we go. Now we can come back up to the top, and we can actually merge that back down. Coming here, make sure it's the highest subdivision. Go to merge, and merge down. Say okay. Alden, hello. Let's see here. Steel Anchor, did you teach yourself ZBrush or did you learn somewhere? So I'm actually I did both. I first started teaching myself ZBrush via YouTube Academy, and from there, I learned a lot. I had the motivation to want to learn it, but I needed help a little bit. When I got to a point where I didn't know where else to go, and I didn't know how to approach certain things, and I knew I wanted to get into the industry, I reached out and became a student of Shane Olson in the 3D Character Workshop. Amazing school, by the way, if you're looking to get into stylized characters. It's highly recommended. Definitely go check it out. So shout out to Shane Olson. But I got pretty far on my own, but it was through the guidance of his community as well as his teaching abilities that actually helped me get to the next level. I keep kicking something under here, sorry. So I'm a little bit of both, but I did not go to college. We won't get into whether or not I think you should go to college. I just think if you have the motivation and drive and you pick a really good learning, a a learning school or somebody to mentor you, that goes a long way. In the areas where polygons overlap, are those polygons just absorbed by the thickness of the print? Kind of. Ryan, we'll get into that in a little bit. Basically, when the poly groups are overlapping, when I go to Dynamesh this together, or when I go to remesh by union, it's going to make sure that they actually become watertight by merging into each other. So not necessarily absorbed, I think is the right word, but they will merge into each other to make it one solid piece. And I'll explain it a little bit more when we get into that. But essentially, yes, you want to make sure that everything is overlapping itself so that when you do try to make it watertight, because that's what you need for printing, that it will actually merge together correctly. Yes, that's what watertight means, correct. Not all heroes wear capes. Okay, cool. One problem I find with fine areas isn't the printability, it's the supports that cause the problems for me. I'm finding that as I sculpt, I'm thinking of support placement more. Absolutely. And that's a great point, Painted Dragon, because your average supports for resin, for example, will be about 0.2 to 0.3 millimeters thick. Sometimes even 0.5 millimeter thick, which may not seem like a lot, but if your part is also the same thickness as supports, yeah, you can run into a little bit of issue there. Which is also kind of leading into, so you know how I had said when designing it that I want to make sure that when it's printable, I can use as little supports as possible, which was like 2 weeks ago. That's partly too why these are pointed upwards in this direction, this way. Most 3D printers rely on the same principle that anything at a 45-degree angle will print without supports generally, depending on your printer and the calibration. So with something like this, for me, I would much rather support this bridge of a leaf than support all of these, you know? But also, too, who knows? We might get creative and cut this flower up into a couple pieces. I'm going to need to fix a couple parts like this, for example. This is too thin. Aesthetically, it's beautiful, but it's too thin to print well. So I would definitely want to do something more where I take this and I actually kind of shove that in a little bit more. Maybe anchor that up a bit and redesign it to fit the printer a little bit better. Kind of push that in. Same thing here. Grab this, touch that guy, bring it in there. That way there's a little bit more here to ensure a successful print. Not a problem to say. Ian, if you could print this project as a miniature, you want to replicate it, for example, make 100 pieces, you should print it 100 times, or is there a way to create something like a mold? So that, yeah, that's I really like that question. That's fun. Okay, so let's see if I can answer this in short. When you're designing something, if you know what the process is going to be, it's going to help you prepare for that process. I sculpted this with 3D printing in mind, so there's a lot of things that we can quote cheat. What makes mold so difficult is the fact that you don't want all these overhangs. You know, you want a controlled overhang if you're going to have one, but molds, there's a bit of science there where then you have to decide if it's going to be a 2-part mold, how many pieces, etc. So I printed this with the idea that I'm going to have as few parts as possible, but if I had to design this for molding, it's going to be a lot of pieces that's going to have to fit next to each other. So, yeah. Plan School. It's the Silent Princess. We are prepping this whole thing for print. Don't mind the cube. That's for scale. Boop. Yeah. I know it's just polygroups, but I like those colors. I know, right? The colors are fun. Yeah, absolutely. Nice tips. It'll definitely print the leaves better now. Yeah, exactly. I don't know how to make 3D molds, but I think it's hard, so it's boring for you. Anything worth doing won't be easy. Your printer is the Photon S 2K resolution when I print at 0.5. And then 0.4 microns, I don't see a difference. Yeah, there isn't much of a difference between then. Really, the smaller microns would be if you're really printing miniatures and you want a lot of detail, then you can go pretty low. Not a problem. Not a huge, it's just because is it because of your 2K printer? No, it's just that size between 0.5 and 0.4 isn't that big of a difference for you to notice with the human eye. You wouldn't notice it that well on bigger prints. I would say you might notice it. You might notice a little bit more sharpness at like 0.3 microns if you're printing miniatures, but 0.5 to 0.4, you're already getting into sizes that your eye itself can't see well enough of. So you're just spending more time printing. So if you're printing a semi-big part, 0.5 is fine. If you're printing miniatures, try 0.3. You might see a lot more results. How much does it cost per models like flower, players, landscapes, etc.? It depends. It depends on the size. It depends on the amount of detail, and it would depend greatly on the amount of work that you're going to put into it. So if I were to sell this for one piece, like if I were to sell this whole thing for one piece, I would charge a lot of money because the time it took to design it, the time it takes to prep it, and then of course materials and print time as well as post cleanup, etc., etc. So printing or prepping cost for your project is greatly going to depend on the overall. If you're going to print like 100,000 parts and try to sell them, then you can lower the cost of the model, because then you're going to be trying to make your money up through long-term sales. Where if you're trying to do one specific piece, so let's say like a freelance, you're going to want to charge for all of it. Your time it took to make the model all the way to the final product. And of course, that's a conversation its piece. So, okay. Hopefully that makes sense on that. You're absolutely welcome, Vic. Okay, let's save it real quick, because we kind of resized the flower a little bit. And let's get into some fun, easy stuff, and then we'll get into the harder stuff. So that way it's a little bit, that way I don't lose you too quickly. And again, this is just my own process of doing things. So I'm sure there might be other people out there who completely have a new process and way of doing things, or just, you know, something that works for them. If my way helps you, great. If you have any suggestions or ideas, feel free to comment them. If you have questions. But yeah, so just remember, this is my way of doing it, but not the only way. Nay, not a problem. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we want to make sure that the size of the sword fits into the base. Now, when I was designing this, I actually used the Master Sword and cut a hole into my base already. So hopefully we won't have to do too much here. But one way we can check it is we can isolate just the sword and the base. With the base selected, we can go to display properties and we can turn on double, and then we can turn on flip. Flip. Nope, you don't want to do that? Why don't you want to do that? There we go, flip. Never mind. Don't turn on double and flip. Just hit flip. Can't do anything today. Okay, and then we're going to turn on transparency, and then we're going to click this guy right here. And what we're looking at is the inside of the base, and we can see that the Master Sword is actually protruding out of one side, but not the other. This might be a little hard to see, but you can see a space right here. And then if we come over here, we can see that it's overlapping a little bit. So this might be as simple as just kind of coming over here and moving this over. Let's go ahead and turn double on for a second. Okay. We have a little bit of overlap here, so I'm checking to see how this fits. And it's not a clean fit. It's not really pretty, but that's okay. That's okay. We'll make this work. This is the fun part about 3D printing, is we get to notice all the mistakes we made, and then we get to fix them. Tooling costs impact design more than people think, and I think that is interesting because home sculpting and printing is starting to pass production pieces in scales. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, the more people get into 3D printing and making their own designs, the more people are going to realize just how much work actually gets put into design and tooling, and that alone is gonna set a new appreciation for it. I come from a aerospace background of manufacturing nuts and bolts for over 13 years before I even got into 3D printing, and I didn't understand it. And then after being in it for so long, I was like, oh my gosh, I completely understand. So when I moved to 3D printing, the design element, the tooling aspect, I was already aware of it, and that made it a lot easier to wrap my head around. So yeah, it's a whole new world. And the thing to remember too is what we're doing, we stopped sculpting and now we moved into engineering. And that's a new animal for some people. So just kind of keep in mind that's like we are designing something that's going to be functional. And that in itself can be quite challenging. So what we're going to do is we're going to recut this base or the sword into this space so that it's going to fit the way we want it to fit. What we're going to do first is I will, however, take this last little hidden part right here, and I'm going to stretch this out. Kind of like that. So that's actually going to cut into. I'm going to stretch it pretty far. Let's turn that back on. Just come here. Let's turn off double because I'm still flipped normals and not the YouTube channel. There we go. So now we have this pretty far back, which is great. We're going to take this guy here, and we're actually going to go ahead and I'm going to clip this off. Actually, what we want to do, we don't want to clip it that way. Let's go slice curve. We're going to slice it like that. We want to make a nice clean cut. We're going to isolate this side. We're going to invert it. We're going to delete hidden to make sure we're not deleting anything else. We can even make that one polygroup if we would like. Let's go to delete hidden, and then we're going to go to close holes, which I have a shortcut up here. So now we have a nice flat surface to work with. And now we can use this to cut into this base officially. So we're going to do that right now. This. I've seen sculptors charge for cut STL upwards to $300 to $400. Patreon, Kickstarter, and other group stuff allows the price to decrease as the artist gets to sell more at once, so it varies a lot. It absolutely does. Yep. And pricing is tricky. I never really like discussing pricing unless I'm talking to a client, but my advice on pricing is pretty generic. Just kind of, when you're trying to figure out how much something costs, kind of look up what artists are making in your area at like a studio level. So let's say, you know, they end up making about $80,000 a year on average in your area. Then what you would do is you would try to divide that by 12 months and get the average monthly cost and then see what's being asked of you. You're going to run into people who want to pay very little, and then you're going to run into clients that are like, I have money, let's do this. There's no real right answer. You have to do what you think is best, but just factor in everything that's being asked of you, from the designing element all the way to the prep and print element. If you're doing step A through Z, figure out a good cost and kind of work in there. There's no real solid answer, but you do it right, you can hit a ballpark area that is going to help you get work and keep food on the table, essentially. So, but that's where I would start. But yeah, keeping all that in mind is going to be super, super helpful. So let's go ahead and take this and let's go ahead and unflip the normals. Bloop. And now we can start making our official cuts the way we would like to do so. Let's go ahead and save it one more time. And, ooh, cool. Hello. Apologies if this is a dumb question. First off, there's no such thing as a dumb question, so don't even worry. When you said this section is engineering, could this act as a starting point for someone who wants to get into that, like a future career swap? Absolutely, yes. 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 Absolutely. Because that's essentially what we're doing. We are engineering something mathematically that is going to make it what it is. You know, where that takes you in the engineering field greatly depends on your knowledge and what it is you're trying to do. Engineering, you know, prepping a part for print isn't going to be the same as, you know, designing a fully functional drone. But if you start understanding what it is you're doing here and applying those mathematical skills to make sure that each time you do it, your part fits and that it fits correctly, then yeah, if you want to, then this could be that starting point for you to start learning more towards whatever it is you want to get into. I've done articulation, which is full-on engineering of functional joint movement. It started for me here. I mean, my aerospace background, like I said, was basically I was a CNC operator. I ran lathes and mills. That got me into 3D printing, and then 3D printing got me into engineering with functionality in mind. So it absolutely can get you started. Whatever you are comfortable with learning, start there, and then slowly and always, in my opinion, make sure that you are challenging yourself and always learning something new as you go on your journey. Do you or know someone who does modeling for characters and figurines? Yes, I do modeling of characters and figurines. I do. And I know quite a few people as well. Interesting, thank you. Not a problem. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to use folders to make our cuts, okay? So we're going to be cutting this base so that the sword fits into the base. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the base and hit Control F and put it in a folder, and we're going to call this base cut. Okay? We're going to take this master sword, we're going to hit Control Shift D, which duplicates our model, because we're going to be using the master sword to make the official cut. We're going to move that down into the folder and underneath the base. And what you're going to see is we're going to be using live booleans to actually make those cuts the way we want. And I have it right here. Cool. So, and we're going to do this a few times. We're not going to just do this with the sword, but this will give you the example of what we are going to do. So with this in mind, I'm going to go ahead and you'll notice on each subtool, you have three options. We have a solid circle on circle option. We have a subtractive circle, and then a like union circle where we're taking the difference between two objects and whatever's in the middle that intersects, that's going to get cut out. We're going to be working with the subtractive one, which is the second one. So we're going to click that. Going to turn off that for a second. So that's going to be underneath. There are little arrows that you can utilize within the folder. You don't have to unless you're making multiple cuts, but it's a good way to control what subtools are being read, but that's also why it's in a folder. We'll just leave that alone. And we're going to go to Live Boolean. Yours might be up here if you're working with the default ZBrush. For me, I set mine over here. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. And you'll notice now that the sword looked like it disappeared. If we take a look on the inside, it's actually being subtracted from this space right here. Now, here's the trick. You can't just take the same subtool, subtract it, cut it, and expect it to fit. There's actually going to be a little bit of shrinkage or inflation that happens. So before we isolate this completely, what we want to do, or what I end up doing, is I turn on symmetry. If your part is still symmetrical, mine is, and I have symmetry on both sides. I'm actually just going to go ahead and clean this up a little bit. So I'm going to take the H polish, and I'm just going to kind of just lightly smooth this down just a little bit on all sides, just a bit. I'm not really going too crazy with it. I just want to take out any imperfections that might cause issue, but I'm not really manipulating it too much, just enough to make sure it's good. We can even check it towards this original sword here, make sure we're not extending out, which looks good. There we go. Now what I'm going to do is we're going to solo this for a second, and we want to actually cut with maybe like a 0.2 to 0.3 millimeter gap in between the accepting subtool and the hole that we're making. And that number is just based off experience off of my own printers. That number could be different for you. So we're going to go to Deformation, and all I do is I just inflate this a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and... Actually, I'm not even going to pre-measure. We're just going to go ahead and hit the inflate, and I'm going to see what... I'm going to see what 2 looks like. It's pretty massive. Let's go 1. Okay, so we're getting a little bit of stretching here, and I don't like that. So what we're going to do is actually, we're going to relax a lot of this here. So I'm going to utilize Dynamesh Utility, which is the same as Dynamesh Master, which I'm a huge fan of. I'm going to turn blur all the way off, and I'm actually going to re-Dynamesh this so that it's nice and sharp. So we're going to go at like, we don't need it too high, 2 million should be fine. We're just going to do that so that it's going to provide us a pretty clean surface. We'll hit that inflate of like 1.5. There. It's not breaking nearly as bad as it was, but we will come in here and kind of maybe smooth that down just a little bit. There we go. It's funny how some 3D artists get into it. I got into it because clients in the packaging design sector wanted rendered product shots rather than photo shoots. Yeah, I know a lot of artists who do that. I've actually done a few of those recently, and they were fun. You never know. There are lots of fields to get into. Let's go ahead and turn my Boolean back on. Now what we're going to do is we're actually going to check to see what that gap looks like. So we can turn on our original sword, and we can see that there's a gap right here. So if we come back here, let's go and turn display properties, flip normals. Turn my Boolean off for a second. Yeah, that's really pushing it pretty far. Cool. I think that'll be good. Okay. And again, what's really interesting is this is a little bit of a guess too. A little bit of trial and error. So don't be afraid to try something. And if it doesn't work 100%, you just kind of note that down. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and make this cut. We're going to turn live Boolean back on. Turn that master sword off. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. And we're going to go ahead and hit Boolean folder. And that's going to make that cut. And then we can actually measure the distance and make sure that it is what we want. So let's go ahead and hit Boolean folder. This might take a second. And you'll notice sometimes too that it's ZBrush thinking for a bit. There we go. Perfect. Now what we can do is we can actually measure that distance. So we can come in here. Now we have this one that's cut. We can go to display properties, flip normals, and then we can come back in here, turn on the original Master Sword, and then we're going to turn on transparency. We're going to click this, and now what we can do, ooh, a little glitchy, we can actually see that gap. We can measure that from the Master Sword on over. So we can come down here where the smallest part is, and we can hit W, hit Y for our transpose, or this little icon up here, you can click that. Whee! All right, there we go. All right, all over the place a little bit. Let's measure the front side of it. So from here to here, looks like it's about 0.15 on that side, which will give us a total of 0.3, and that's really good. That's a good number. Might be a little loose, actually, but we're just going to glue it, so that's okay. And then if we also hit solo for a second to make sure that we're seeing what we're seeing, come down here. Now this one's the steepest. That's 1.7. That's not too bad. That's 0.17, so that's pretty good. And then let's come here on the side. 0.16. So again, we're looking at yeah, 0.16. So we're looking at a total of 0.3, which is perfect. And then let's come here, and then let's actually display property, unflip that, and just kind of see how it looks. Now, we want to be careful not to have too much of a gap, because if we have too much of a gap, then all of our other tools and stuff might be a little funky and may not fit correctly. So we're got to keep that in mind too, that this will be fitting exactly where we want. So I'm happy with that one. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to delete this one because I'm not done yet. I have to add in one other thing, and I like to cut all the same holes into the same object at the same time if possible. Right? It's late here, so time for bed. Great stream as always, dude. I'll catch the rest tomorrow. Stay frosty. Stay frosty, dude. Thanks for stopping by. I really appreciate it, Painted Dragon. I'll talk to you later, my friend. Okay. So I'm actually going to delete this one. I still have the folder, so we're good there. Now we're going to go ahead and actually figure out this Korok, and we're going to see what we need there. So let's go ahead and rename this as a Korok. And let's save it real quick. So we're going to save this as number 5. We're going to call this cuts, because now we're making our cuts. I have a question. How easy is this to learn for people who have limited drawing ability? This looks like something fun. Honestly, it is. You don't need to know how to draw to do what we're doing here today whatsoever. I can draw, but I don't rely on my drawing knowledge per se. I would say the thing you would really want to focus on is the anatomy of whatever it is you want to sculpt. So if you want to sculpt characters, understanding 2D is going to always help, but in 3D, you have to make something actually look good from all angles, not just from one side. So 2D artists, in my opinion, not knocking it in any way, shape, or form, it's just they're able to cheat a little bit easier than in 3D. So you don't have to be super talented 2D artists. You don't even have to really know how to draw. If this is the medium that works for you, then go ahead and give it a shot. You know, because again, 3D presents its own challenges that are quite different than knowing how to draw. But that doesn't mean that it won't help either. So if you're somebody who is interested in sketching in 2D, go ahead and do that, because you can sketch anatomy, you can sketch things in perspective, you can get a better understanding, and it will just help more. But you don't need that functionality. I know a lot of artists who can't draw at all. They're like, I don't like drawing, I don't do it. And so they don't have to, but they are way better at 3D than even I am. So, yeah. Thank you, sir. I'll try this out and report back. Absolutely. Yeah, please do. A lot of 3D artists say they can't draw. Yeah, exactly. Knowing how to break down real life drawing into 3D forms, then you're good. Absolutely. Yeah. So, okay, let's take this Korok, okay, and let's figure out how we're actually going to pin him. So, if we turn off live Boolean for a second, and we just go ahead and take a look at how I have this Korok character sitting, this will now kind of tell us exactly what we need to, or what approaches we can take. And what I'm thinking is if I turn on transparency, yeah, what I'm thinking we're gonna do is actually let's get him merged with a key. So I'm gonna go ahead and underneath him, I'm gonna actually put him in a folder, call this a Korok character, or Korok, just Korok dude. Korok dude. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm actually going to take the basic IMM brush, so BIT, and I'm going to get a Q cube. And I'm going to go ahead and draw out a Q cube here. No, you're not, because we have subdivision. So we'll just delete lower, and I'll draw out a Q cube now. Aha, I fooled you. Okay. Now I'm going to split hidden. Or split masked, I'm sorry, not hidden, because it's not hidden. So split on masked. There we go. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is basically create a key that we'll use for cutting. So I'm going to go ahead and embed this a little bit into his body. Actually turn off transparency so you can see a little bit better. Let's just go ahead and turn off the Master Sword. Now, there's a reason why I chose a Q cube, is because I want full control of the cube just by using mask and stuff. Actually couldn't draw very well until I started sculpting, learning and understanding form and flow. Ooh, nice. Adding on to Ryan, I've come across a few people who say sculpting actually helped their drawing. You never know. Exactly. Because one trick we have to learn as a 3D artist is the ability to break things down to its simplest shape. When we look at something as a design element, it's hard. For example, let's look at this here. I'm going to show you, because this is what we're going to be focusing on. I wanted to sculpt a T-Rex head if we have time. If we take a look at this character can be intimidating on what it is its actual shape and function is, right? You look back at from here and you're like, there's no way I'm going to sculpt this or even draw this. But then if we just start looking at simplifying it, let's take the skeleton, for example. You can see roundness on the back, roundness in the rib cage. So this could just be a sphere right here. So we can start seeing that, oh, that might be a sphere. His legs look like really long, thin, kind of round. So these can be cylinders. So I can start placing cylinders here. Same with this tail. It does, again, I can get this, the curvature, and it tapers. So maybe this is a cylinder that tapers down. So being able to break things down into simple forms and just kind of like identifying simple shapes can help you in your 2D drawing as well. So absolutely. Also just makes you a great artist. Okay, so I'm going to take the Z modeler brush, and I'm actually going to delete these edges. We don't need all of this noise. We just need this Q cube. I'm going to go ahead and actually select this bottom side by drawing out the mask, holding Alt, which will select the side that I want. And I'm just going to bring this out and taper this down. Not a whole lot. In my opinion, you don't want a straight cube or a straight cylinder as a key, because again, those sharp edges could cause conflict when trying to fit. So even giving it like a 5-degree taper is going to help you in the long run. So just something to keep in mind. So we're just going to taper it a little bit, like such. And then what I like to do, my own little trick of the trade, is I like to go to crease, and I like to, nope, not crease yet. I like to go to poly groups, and then I like to group by normals, giving me all these different edges. Then we go to geometry, crease, crease Paul Gabry's, bloop, just like that. And then I like to bevel that edge a little bit. You can crease your beveled edges just ever so slightly. Just like that. Okay. Then I like to do it one more time. Go to polygroups. Go ahead and group by normals. That should be fine. Let's go ahead and crease geometry. And let's just crease. Yeah, crease everything. Perfect. This will just give us a little bit cleaner of an edge. Or you could just hit crease all. It's totally fine, either way. Then from here, I subdivided a few times. So it actually has density. Then I'll delete lower. So I have all this geometry to worry about. And then I'll go ahead and hit Dynamesh. A little bit of a blur, like blur 2 is totally fine. And I'll Dynamesh this at about no more than 200,000. You don't need it to be crazy. Or maybe we do. Oh, that is pretty. Let's go up a little bit. Dynamesh it. There we go. Let's go a little higher. Let's actually go up a little bit more. There we go. A little lower. I'm going to use Dynamesh Master. It's one of my favorite. It just does a little bit better of a job. Do you have any questions? Okay, it's yelling at me. Okay, perfect. That works. You don't have to do that if you choose to. You just want to make sure that it's nice and solid. We're going to be merging them together, so up to you on how you want to operate that. You can even come in here and you can use the Z Modeler brush. I'm thinking of all the ways you could do it. And we can go ahead and hover over an edge. There we go, that's why. Go hover over an edge, and we can go insert multiple edge loops, and we can actually just insert all that ourselves too. So that way we know just how dense it is. And that will do the same thing. So whatever's easiest for you, we just want to give it some density, and we'll keep it here at the 6,000 mark. Let's actually place it a little bit better. So again, a bunch of ways to do the same thing, whatever works for you guys. All right, now that we have that, let's make sure that it is deep enough into the cut, which it looks like our character's foot is already kind of digging in there a little bit, which will be perfectly fine. So it'll give us another contact point to make sure that it seats correctly. And then the last thing I actually want to do is, we need to fix this Korok a little bit. So I'm actually going to be utilizing this pivot point right here. So we can see that he's actually kind of in the Master Sword. It's actually kind of digging into it a little bit. So let's pivot him around. And maybe kind of dial him back a little bit. Yeah. We don't want him digging into too much. If we do this, we can come here and then we can back him up. Again, this is where you can start seeing where on your design things may or may not fit correctly. And then you start kind of looking at it. There, it's slightly touching. And that's okay that it's slightly touching there. So now we can come here. Transparency. We'll bring this back over and refit that where we need it to be. Which that looks pretty good. There we go. Hi, Momo. How you doing? Welcome in, welcome in. We're talking about cutting for 3D printing and the processes I use to do that. There we go. Okay, the other thing we're going to do is we're actually going to grab the pizza box here. I'm actually going to select the Korok and the Master Sword, because his hand is kind of digging in a little bit, and I'm actually going to bring him over until it's not digging in. This way you could just move two things at the same time. There we go, that's looking better. Because we only want it touching. We don't really want it engaging too much. Okay. That should be fine. Hey, what's happening, Luis? Alright. Hopefully this makes sense for you guys. Let me know if you have any questions, as I tend to kind of go through this pretty quickly. Okay. Now that we're here, what we want to do is we do want to give it some stability. While glue can be our best friend, at the same time, what we don't want to have happen is we don't want... Ooh, let's actually squeeze this in a little bit. There we go. What we don't want to have happen is to be completely dependent on that glue, because you may just want to like set it in there and then have it in pieces, and that's fine. So we can bring in some stability into the print, even though I think he's going to be pretty well balanced since most of his weight is aligned on that foot. What we could do is take this, Control-Shift-D, duplicate, kind of bring this around. We can bring this up. Let's turn that Master Sword back on. Transpose. What we could do is actually add a key here, maybe a little flatter one. That's just right here in the design. That will dig into the sword a little bit. So we'll have to cut it out of the sword just a tiny bit. Bring that over. Turning off transparency. Now let's actually measure it too, because we don't want this to be too small. So we'll use the transpose trick. It's 2 millimeters. That's not too bad. I mean, it's kind of small. Maybe we'll do something like that. That way you can set him in and lock him in with the sword, and then that sword will give him structure and balance. The trick is to hide it so that we are not, A, showcasing where the keys are and it looks seamless, and B, but it still is functional and has structure. That's what we're going for. And I'm thinking that that's not too bad of a placement. That's about there. Can even bring that over a little bit. Bring that up. What we could do as well is come back here. We can isolate this guy. Mask it. Fade that mask. We can actually take the move brush. And what we can do with the move brush is we can turn on backface mask by going to brush, auto masking, and backface mask. What we can do is actually manipulate the design to help hide that key just a little bit better. Turn that off. So we have a little key right here that we can weld into that spot. So with that, now what we can do is merge these keys to his body, and then from there, use him as a cutter. So we're going to go ahead and take our Korok dude, make sure mask is off, and then we're going to go ahead and we'll merge folder together. So now we have him like this. And if we want to, We can just turn off all the color, holding shift and doing this. That way we can just focus on the design element. And yeah, I think that's gonna work. Good, your models look great, and your channel taught me a lot of modeling. Awesome! Well, Mo, that's great to hear. I'm glad. Yay! Okay, now we have this. We're gonna do now. Let's go ahead and save it because we're still functioning on the cuts, and we haven't really done anything too bad. But we are gonna start cleaning this up a little bit. So this Korok dude split. And delete this folder now because now we have the merge Korok, and we'll save it as a new subtool. That'll be 06. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and copy him. We'll hide him. We'll come into our base, and we're going to go ahead and paste our copy in there. And now we're going to do that same thing that we've done before. But remember, we're also going to want to cut a piece out of the sword for that stability. So we're definitely going to need to use him more than once to make this cut. Do we need to do a special setup on the ZBrush scene once we start to have the correct measurements? Yes, what you'll need to do, I wouldn't say special setup. What you would need to do is just make sure you set scale. So I did that at the beginning of this video where I created a 1-inch cube, and then I went up to Z plugin, and then I went to Scale Master. So if you back this up to, I would say about like an hour ago, you can definitely see how I did that. And then that way you can go through. I also have a YouTube channel where I talk about setting scene scale. Let me actually get you that link real quick because you can always watch it there too instead of having to back all the way up. But here's my link. And if you go to my YouTube and you go under ZBrush Help, you can actually get a how to set scale in ZBrush. So for you guys, that would look like this. You just come to my YouTube. And then from here, go to playlist. Or if you have ZBrush Help, click that. Mute myself. You don't need to hear me twice. Scroll on down until you get how to scale and measure in ZBrush. And that will take you right here. So yeah, when you start cutting for 3D print, it's very helpful to set the scale. After that, you're good to go. Okay, so we have our Korok guy here. And let's rename this one so that we say that he is our final Korok. Because he's the one we're going to be utilizing the most. And let's set this Korok here. We'll call this a Korok cutter. This is where it's helpful to rename your tools. Same here. We'll go Master Sword Cutter. That way we know somewhere down the line, or if we ever come back to this file, what subtools we use to cut the keys out. And let's go ahead and resave that. Great, thank you. I'll check it out. Not a problem. Hello, how are you doing? Welcome in. Okay. So now what we're going to do is actually set up on how this is going to cut out of the base and then how it's going to cut out of the sword. So we'll come here to this guy. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to set him to cut. Let's actually put him under the Master Sword just for ease of use. And then, just like we did with the Master Sword, we're going to go ahead and turn on Live Boolean. And we can see that he's making a little cut right here in the base. And what I'm going to do is the same exact math that I did for the Master Sword, I'm going to do for the Korok because we're in the same scale. So I inflated this at about 1.5. And that's going to expand that. So that was before, that's after. So expanded that just a little bit. And now we can check that math. We can come in here and we can go ahead and Boolean folder. Thank you so much, I appreciate it. Okay, let's solo this out. And now we can see here we have that hole. So we do the exact same thing, guys. We go to display properties, flip our normals, come back up to our subtools, We're going to turn the final Korok eye on. Turn off live Boolean for a second. Hit transparency. Select this guy right here. And look, we have our key right here. Let's hit W for the gizmo. Oopsies. Hit Y to have transpose. Hit right click a bunch of times so that it really just throws everything off. Go ahead and draw that out there. There we go. We're going to hold Alt. We're going to start dragging. Yeah, go right there. Whoops. Grab that. There we go. Perfect. Go ahead, grab a spot. Hold Shift. That's 1.6 on each side. Now, I know what you might be thinking, too, that this seems like a very big gap. But in the 3D printing world, this is actually very small. So this fit is going to shrink, too, when we print. So that 1.6 per side is actually pretty decent. And we also have to factor in, too, if we do decide to glue this, which I will personally, we're going to make sure that the glue has a place for it to go. Whenever you make a cut, make sure that there's enough room for the glue that you're going to be adding to fill that hole correctly and actually grab onto that part. If you have it too tight, the glue will seep out and it just might be snug. A little glue might still be in there, but it'll be a lot easier for the glue to flow around and grab on if there's space for it to go. So that's really good. So again, that 1.25 inflate is giving us that perfect measurement that I'm looking for. So that means we can always incorporate that throughout the whole scene and everything will be consistent. So I'm pretty happy with that. And that's actually the second to last step for the final base. So we're going to come here to our base. We'll go ahead and we'll delete this base because we want to make all of our cuts at the same time. We don't need to like have one cut, then merge it, then do another thing, then merge it. It's just going to be too much work. Is Dynamesh Utility and Dynamesh Master the same? What is the difference? Thanks, Ian. So Dynamesh Utility and Dynamesh Master, as I understand it, is the same but slightly different. Dynamesh Utility has less options, but it does do the poly count millions. It will actually, so you could set a target here. I just have better luck with Dynamesh Master, but apparently that plugin is no longer downloadable on the Pixologic side. I don't know. So that's actually, but you can see here you have a lot more options with Dynamesh Master, which I prefer utilizing, especially during this workflow. Well, you get to see the finished printed product. Not only are you going to be able to get a chance to see it if you follow me on my Instagram channels, but you're going to get it. This is for you guys. You get to have it for free. No hidden strings, I promise. I just want you guys to have something nice. It's just as a giant thank you for being so supportive and welcome me into this community. So if you guys would like one, stay tuned because I will definitely be sending this out. You'll have faster notifications if you do follow me on my socials. So if you missed that link, there's that link one more time. But yeah. And I'll make sure to link to it on my next stream. I need to buy resin. That's something I need to do. I just remember. Okay. And now we're going to repeat this process again. Now, I'm going to... What am I going to do here? This flower is one of the things that I knew was going to be... I think what I want to do with the flower, I want to try to keep it one piece if possible. That's what I would like to do. So let's do a few things. Let's take our move brush. Let's actually bring this up so that it's sitting on top. Make sure everything's sitting on top. What 3D printer do I recommend for good quality parts? I recommend a resin printer for good quality parts if you're looking for high detail. But FDM printers are just as good for getting good quality parts, but not as good for detail. But you can get some very impressive prints when it comes to FDM. It's just time. It's time over everything else. You think they renamed it Dynamesh Utility? I don't know for sure. I'm pretty confident in saying that Dynamesh Utility was different than Dynamesh Master. Because I have both. But I've used Dynamesh Master the most. It might be worth asking. But I'm not 100% sure either, Ryan. So okay. What we will do is we're going to increase the resolution of this flower up to about 3 million. Go ahead and save this. And what I will be doing is I will be right back. Okay, what I will be doing is actually taking this Korok guy, because he's my cutter. I'm going to go ahead and actually duplicate him. I'm going to bring him out here just for a second. Solo him out. I'm going to go ahead and hit auto groups. So let's go to polygroups, auto groups. I'm going to select this guy right here because I need to borrow him. But for the Master Sword, I'm going to leave that one there. I'm going to go ahead and split hidden. So now I have this piece right here. Turn everything off except for the Silent Princess. We're going to bring this down and reuse the cutter we just built. There's no point in building another one if we already have this one. Go ahead and transpose. And we'll probably blow this up a little bit. And engulf the stem. Yeah. Just like that. So now we're basically making sure that the stem is embedded in there. Let's turn that back on for a second. And make sure that it's touching all the areas that we want it to. Kind of fixing a little bit of a hole issue there. That's going to get embedded inside, so that's okay. So now I'm just kind of making sure everything looks good and makes sense as it's, quote, resting on top of each other. There we go. So now I'm going to go ahead and actually merge this down. So let's go to merge and merge down. Say okay. Now this is on the same piece, and now we can actually cut this out of the base. And I'm thinking I'm going to want to keep this in one piece. It might be a little bit of a pain to, you know, get rid of some of those supports. But what we will do is we will split this real quick. So let's go ahead and split hidden. Use deformation, and I will increase this a little bit. So I'm going to hit 1. Maybe 0.15. Yeah, a little bit bigger, a little bit thicker. Let's actually turn on back face. Actually going to go ahead and kind of just thicken this bottom part up. Like such. Yeah, that'll be okay. So I'm debating. And I am thinking that it will be wise to split this flower. So let's do that. I'm going to show you how we're going to do that relatively simple. So we're going to split this up so we have a little bit more control of what's happening. So let's come here to the Silent Princess. Let's merge this down. And this is where you get to kind of play around a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and save as, because please don't play around without saving an extra file. You never know. Big day tomorrow, right? Absolutely, Zerchan. Hey, how did you go about animating your final results in a rotary way? Oh, the turntable. Really, really simple. All you do is you have your render the way you like it. Come up to movie. Go large dock. Go ahead, go down to tilt image, or title image, I'm sorry. Turn all that to 0 if you don't want the ZBrush logo. And then all you do is you just, after you've set up all your lights, all that render, then you just hit turntable, and it will do a turntable based on the center point of your model. When that's done, you go to movie, and then you hit H for high def, save as. Sorry, not save as. Export. Then you export it out, and it will export out your movie. Now, obviously, that was not the best example, but that's essentially how you would do it. Then you go to movie, and then delete if you want to get rid of it. And say, yep. Okay. What we're going to do is we're going to duplicate this princess flower. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to... This is where Dynamesh Master works in my favor. So that I actually Dynamesh this at the same level that it's currently at, which is 3.5. There we go. Now this will essentially be pretty much watertight. You can actually come here to display properties. Double is on. You can actually see that it is, yeah, there's no real major imperfections. Maybe a, nope. Yeah, perfect. Is good, we can do that. Now what we can do is we can actually find areas to cut this up. So I'm actually going to make this a different polygroup. And I'm going to, I think I'm going to cut this in a couple ways. I'm actually going to cut this off right here. So I'm going to use, nope, slice curve. I'm going to cut right about there. And a real trick, I believe that works with slice curve. Let's find out. Mask that area off. There we go, yeah. Actually cut that spot right there. So a good trick with mask curve, if you want, what you can do, you could take the mask lasso, with slice curve, and you can actually mask off what you want to protect. As you can see with slice curve, if I make the slice right here, even on this one little spot, it's going to slice through everything. So if you mask that area off, actually just protect everything else, and I slice, that should work out pretty well. So you can slice right here like that. Then I can turn around and auto group it once I have that selection. So I can come here to polygroups, auto groups, take that, and then I can make that one group. And now I have a cut that I can utilize. How did you go about animating your final results? Way. Oh, I just explained it a little bit ago. With the, you go up to movie and you go to turntable. Sometimes YouTube is a little bit behind Twitch. Hi, what if you have multiple intersecting separate subtools you would have to Dynamesh each subtool individually and then combine them as one, or Dynamesh it all as one. Just Dynamesh it all as one. If you know all those parts are going to intersect and become one piece, then just merge them all together and then Dynamesh it afterwards. I would still duplicate because sometimes Dynamesh will lessen the quality, and you can always project detail from your non-Dynamesh subtool to your Dynamesh subtool. So I definitely recommend merging it all and then from there Dynameshing. Just make a duplicate when you try that, because like I said, sometimes things happen. Not a problem. Okay, we're gonna do the same thing here. I'm gonna mask this section off right here. Come back. Maybe. See, I have a feeling that this is gonna be pretty heavy, and so I want to be able to control that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually going to mask it off like that. I'm going to invert. No, I'm not going to invert. I'm actually going to go back. Again, slice curve. I'm going to slice it right there. Nope, don't do that. Invert that. There we go. Take this one. Go ahead and make that like that. There we go. So I'm making all of these pieces slightly different. So now what I can do with this piece is I can hollow this piece out and make it much lighter and then connect it back together. So it's going to be better to have separate pieces. We'll still have some support, but I'm not going to separate the leaves. I think that will be fine the way it is. That'll let me kind of print that more like that, support the underside. Not a lot of detail under here, so cleaning that up won't be too bad. And then we can print this as one piece if we wanted to. Or what we could do is make this a final piece. If we wanted to kind of like make the stem a separate piece, we could do that. I don't really think I want to, actually. I think we'll leave it like that. I like keeping my pieces as few as possible. I don't mind using supports. This whole thing will be printed in resin, so I'm okay with supports. Savage, this looks great. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Not a problem, Dan Pants. Okay. So now we have this. What we're going to do is we're actually going to split this up into many pieces. So I'm going to take this, turn around, and split hidden. Come on down, grab this guy, split hidden. And now we have our 3 separate pieces. And what we'll do is we'll take our piece. Let's hit solo for a second. And let's go ahead and hit close holes. Which again, close holes, geometry, modify topology, and close holes. We're just going to do that for each one of these pieces that has a hole there. Close holes. And right here, same thing, close holes. There we go. So now we can see where they're intersecting. And then from here, we can go ahead and actually add in our cuts. Let's go ahead and do that. So let's add our keys. Actually, what we should do, let's see. Oh, perfect. Okay. So before I made the duplicate, I didn't uniform polygroup it, so I can actually borrow this section and actually split hidden, which is great. Because now I can duplicate this and use this multiple times. Let's merge that part back down. Now I can use this multiple times to do what I want to do. Let's work at one piece at a time. Any tips on how to fix poles when you're already subdivided? I'm getting like a pinching effect from some poles. Having a hard time fixing them. Zerchan, I would say one of two approaches might be best. Either how do I put this? I would say maybe duplicate and try to ZRemesh, and then project your details back after you subdivide to kind of fix your poles. Or it might be time to consider manual retopology. It depends on what it is you're doing. But if your poles are a problem and you want to fix those, Z-remeshing could help you a lot, and then project details. So let me see if I can give you a better example. Let me go ahead, come here, make Polymesh 3D. Let's go ahead and paste. Let's delete this guy. He's already Dynameshed, but what I would say is, let's say I wanted to fix that. What I could do is duplicate him, right? And then go ahead and Z-remesh. So go to Geometry, Z-remesher. Go ahead and Z-remesh at whatever you think is good. And then project those details back. I'll do it with a Dynamesh version to a subdivided version. Do I know FNAF? I'm familiar with FNAF, but I'm not I wouldn't say that I'm highly versed. I chose to do this on a really high character, but this is the approach I've done to fix it quickly. At the end of the day, if the pole's not too much trouble, you know, and then yeah, subdivide a couple times, right? And then make sure that your only two are selected. If you had multiple tools, just make sure the two are visible. Then go to project, and then project all, and it'll project all that detail like that onto your new subdivision. So that's a way to see about trying to fix your geometry and fix those poles and to not lose all that work. And obviously it works really well from a Dynamesh part to a subdivided part as well. As you can see here, this is Dynameshed, this is subdivided. I subdivided just under 2 million, but the thing itself was 1.2 million. So I lost some detail based on keep kicking it down low, but that's still not that bad, because then I could just subdivide up one more time, project if I wanted to, and it will launch that in. And there we go. So that's how I would do it. The other way, of course, is manual retopology, and you can see the detail loss isn't so bad. So hopefully that works. Yeah, but I think I'm going to lose the fingers with the Z-remesh. Well, what you could do is when you go to Z-remesher, when you go to Z-remesh it, you can turn smooth down. So if you have a part here that's you want to Z-remesh, so I'll make Polymesh. Duplicate that real quick. Fill that out. You can do a keep groups and turn that down to 0. And then Z-remesh that, and that could help. You might lose a little bit of the fingers, but the project will try to keep the volume too. But I would say turn on keep groups and then take smooth groups and turn it down. Even if you only have one poly group, that's helped me a lot with fingers. Or poly group your fingers and then turn that on and turn that to 0. That will keep it from shrinking. Or go to, just like now I'm thinking of 100 ways to approach it. You can go to your current subdivision model and turn off smooth when you subdivide to keep it the same volume as possible before Z-remeshing. But that's more of like when you subdivide up. Thingies! Yeah, absolutely, Snickles. Okay. Let's come here. Bring this down. So these will be relatively small pieces, but in resin we can get away with that, so. And you might be wondering, wow, this looks kind of jagged right here, and you would be absolutely correct. So we can go ahead and actually smooth that down just a little bit. Or what we can do is take something like clip curve and kind of try to, that's clip rec. Clip curve. You can do something like that and kind of, oh, because I had it right the first time. Kind of clip that down just a little bit so it's not too bad. And then readjust it as needed. Same here. Go ahead and kind of do a little clip there if we wanted to, or we could do a light smooth. All in how you wanted to approach it. If you're going for true seamless, take your time. For me on this one, it doesn't really matter, because a lot of times what I like to do, especially when you're painting, is I like to, when I glue this together, the glue spews out, then I like sand it down, then I prime it, and a lot of times these seams go away. So little tricks of the trade there. I'm gonna go ahead and duplicate this one. Now I'm gonna put this over here. Like that. Looks good, Skillville. Oh, let's see. Thanks a lot. I'm going to try that. Yeah, absolutely. Please. Well, do not worry, guys. Like I said at the beginning of this, I'm going to be giving you guys this model. So do not fret. Okay. Perfect. Perfect, perfect, perfect. All right. Sounds good. Now we get to set this up and start cutting things. So first thing we want to do before we start cutting anything is actually merge the keys together for the thing that we want. Hey, thanks, Joe. Appreciate it. So what I want to do is I actually want to take the stem and merge these keys together with. So actually what I should do with this one is turn it around. Like this. There we go. Transparency. Bring that in here. And the reason why I said I should turn this one around, because I want to make this part hollow in the slicer. So if I cut the key here and dig this section out, then I'll be able to control how light this is. And that way it's not so heavy, so as it's hanging here, this can actually support the weight of that. And that's something also to keep in mind when you're printing stuff. Hey, Mr. Chris, how you doing? We're about 2 hours in, so, and the topic today is about prepping something for 3D print. But don't worry, you're on YouTube, so you can watch it. We're gonna watch it again anyway. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. All right. So we're gonna be merging these two, and where is it? So we're going to be merging these keys together with this right here. So let's take these and let's just merge them down. So let's come over here to merge down, and one more time, merge down. Now we have this guy right here. So this looks pretty good. I like it. What we could do as well is we can just do ourselves a favor. We can duplicate this real quickly. Hide this one. We'll call this the Silent Princess stem. And then we're going to go ahead and just Dynamesh this completely at, say, 1 million. Which should give us pretty good results and not lose too much detail. So that's looking pretty good. Wonderful. Now what we can do is we can take this duplicate that we did. And we can go ahead and... Perfect. Let's go ahead and delete hidden on that. Now for these guys right here, we're going to go ahead and put the bulbs into a folder. Doop doop. Okay, I'm going to take this one. I'm going to split hidden. Perfect. There we go. So I'm going to merge this one up. So this will be the cutter for this guy right here. This is where you're going to want to use this arrow that I talked about earlier. So you have this arrow right here. That's going to activate this one for the cut. I'm going to turn this one on, activate this arrow. So see this number's 4. Now when I hit this arrow, that number's 2. That just means that in the folder, the live Boolean is going to respond this bulb to this cutter and this bulb to that cutter, all within the same folder. If it gets too complicated, then you just do one in each folder, but that's a way to do it. Turn on live Boolean and make sure we set these to cut just like they are. And let's also make sure, because these are the cutter ones, we'll go to Deformation. We'll inflate this by that 1.5. Actually, 1.5 is too much. Ooh. It was 1.2. Just gotta be careful of that wall thickness right there. So if you get this where this wall thickness is a little much, we could take this, take our move, take backface, and kind of pull that out a little bit. So we give it a little extra wall thickness if we're a bit scared of it. That way we make sure there's enough there for it. Grab this one. Grab this one, I mean. And we'll inflate this as well. Deformation. Inflate 1.2. Same thing. We get this guy. We kind of pull that out just a little bit. Not cutting too much, so we're good there. Let's see. I don't do my own NFTs. I don't have my own NFTs. I don't think I'm popular enough. Why do I have to consistently have to change the picture quality every time I watch a ZBrush stream? I don't know. No idea. I usually stream at a 1080p that I reduced to 900p on all my streams. Been doing it for the last year on my side, and no complaints. Because 900p doesn't look that much different than 1080p. And for 3D printing, is there an ideal resolution topology, or is higher better? Oh, great question. If you can, try to keep each subtool under 500,000. There's not really a correlation between higher is better, but I recommend that you go through Decimation Master and maybe keep it at like 250 thou, which is generally what I do, and that could help you a lot. So I try to keep it as low as possible without losing any detail, because slicers just have a hard time wrapping their heads around everything. Want to see that face in full 4K? No, you don't. There's so many blackheads. Alright. Now we got that going, which is pretty good. Pretty good. Then we can go ahead And we can Boolean the folder, guys. Let's do it. And look at that. Now we have this guy separate and this one separate. So we can call this one, let's go here real quick. Let's rename. We can copy the name, Control C, and come here, rename, paste, underscore top flower. And then let's go down here and we'll rename this bulb. That's what it is. Now we have our parts just like that. And this should be Dynamesh the way we want, but if we want to make sure that it's as watertight as possible, then we can go to Geometry, Modify Topology, Weld Points, Close Holes. Weld points, close holes. That's a good way to make sure everything is as watertight as possible. I like watching in 1080, but it's only showing 720 now. Yeah, it's because I have to reduce it for my computer setup. Okay, now let's do this right here. So we have this guy. You turn off live Boolean for a second. Let's save it. And now what we can do is we can actually take this full version, delete this one. We have this one, the stem here, which is perfect. This way we like it. I like it. Okay. So this bulb, we can go ahead and delete this folder. So now we have the stem, the bowl, and the flower top. And really, we just need now to put the flower, the stem portion to cut out of the main base. And then we're almost done. To redo that flower, couldn't you just close the hole using ZModeler, then just remesh? You could. That's not a bad way of doing it. I use Dynamesh a lot because Dynamesh has a great way of getting rid of all the imperfections on the inside so that there are no actual problems, where ZRemesher might not fix that. So I use Dynamesh a lot because it reduces a lot of problems, and then if you use weld points and close holes, that generally fixes the majority. There is one way to check to make sure that your mesh is completely watertight, which I'll go through at the end. But that is not a bad way of doing it. Just make sure that you don't have any holes within your model afterwards, which happens a lot, especially if you merge things together and it intersected with little gaps. Not always, ZModeler will follow the poly groups as closely as possible, so it won't always get rid of those gaps. Now we have this. Let's go through the base cut one more time. So we have the Korok, the Master Sword, and the base that we're cutting. Now we'll take the Silent Princess. We're going to Control-Shift-D, duplicate it. Just turn everything on in here. Now for this stem, we're going to do the same thing we've done this whole time. Now this is the stem cutter, so let's rename this Silent Princess Stem Cutter. Oop. And then let's go to Deformation. You guys know 1.25. That is the thickness that has been working for us. We're now going to come back to Subtool, set that to negative cut, turn on Live Boolean, and let's see what the damage is doing. That's looking pretty good. Actually, not too bad. Even on these little details, it's cutting pretty clean. So now that's going to be all three major cuts, Korok, the flower, and the Master Sword, all in one spot. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and file save as. We'll make this 7. Because again, we've done all that work and we've gotten rid of folders, but we don't want to make sure that we don't, you know, lose too much along the process. So I save a lot. So we come here now and we go to Boolean folder. And take ZBrush however long it takes. Boop. And there, we got that guy right there. Very cool. Now, again, we can go through and we can continuously check everything. So we can turn on the stem here. Let's go down to display properties. Let's go to flip transparency, click the stem, zoom in real quick. Even though this might get repetitive, it is important to always check your work. So come on down. 1.4 on the bottom side. 1.5 on each side. So it's the same thing as before, which is perfect. That's what we want. We can turn off live Boolean. We now can actually get rid of the space cut here, so we can go ahead and get rid of that. Go ahead and save. There we go. Now we can turn on everything. And if we hit Shift X, we'll explode. Ooh, look at that. I have 2 Koroks. Where is this guy? Oh, this was a cutter. Because we have to cut the Master Sword piece. Perfect. Yay. See? Let's do that. And then we'll be final. Let's turn everything else off. Take this Master Sword. Let's bring it in. Master Sword. Final. Take this Korok guy. Turn him on. Subtract. Boolean folder. See here that it's cutting against. This will also help us identify which side of the sword actually goes into the base. And then let's go ahead and Boolean folder. Won't all that minor detail surface get lost when printing, or how big are you planning on printing this? That's a great question, IRL Cat Girl. Boop. And what I will tell you is yes and no. So the answer is yes. Minor surface detail will always get lost with printing. It's on average, without doing any tricks or any advanced techniques in 3D printing, you will lose up to about 10 to 15% of all detail. So the way to combat that is to cut much deeper in your cuts. So what we tend to do is, and there's a couple ways of going about doing this, but generally speaking, what I tend to do is make sure that, like, when I have cuts like this coming in, that I make them as deep as possible. If there are things that I'm thinking aren't going to show up very well, then I'll take the contrast brush and I'll actually, like, paint over a lot of it just to make sure that it'll show. And I do that on the very final subtool before exporting. Yo, this sculpt is actually 13 million polys. Yeah. Yeah, it actually was 6, but the reason why it got so high is because I Dynameshed higher to preserve a lot of that detail. So now we have this. Let's see here. So this is the final base. Yeah, we need to rename some of this too. So let's call this, I'll call this the base final. Go. And just to ensure that everything works, let's turn that Korok on. Let's take this. Let's make sure that let's flip it. Transparency. Engage there. Just want to make sure that it is going to fit correctly. And it looks like it will. Yeah, that's looking right. Oops. Grab that one. Flip. Transparency off. Let's go ahead and save this as a final one. So what I'll do, I like to also, when I save my subtools, I'll go 3D Print Prep 08. Before it was 07 cut. This was 08 called pre-decimation, because I'm going to Dynamesh it as well, but I like to save the high res at the end. What slicer do you use for your prints? Generally, I will use Chichu Box or Prusa Slicer as my go-to. They just work for my machines. I have some pretty old printer machines. I am hoping one day to get into a Formlabs printer. Formlabs, if you're out there in the world. Okay. Now we get to look at everything. So now we can call this our final. We can call this our Master Sword final. Boop. There we go. Go ahead and delete that one. Save as, again, our pre-decimation. You've never heard of those? Oh, yeah. Go to just Google Chichu Box or Prusa Slicer. Those are great ones. Those are for resin. Although Prusa Slicer also works for FDM. If you're going for FDM prints, then Cura is great. They work. That's free as well. Although I went back to Simplified 3D for FDM because they got a lot better, but that is a paid one, unfortunately. It was pretty expensive when I bought it. Okay. So here we are, everyone. This is our setup. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we have 6 pieces that go together. Now we kind of need to go ahead and check it for any type of failures that could occur. Yeah, I use Cura because you do FDM. Very nice, yeah. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and save this, and then we're going to do a print check. So I'm going to take this cube that is my name subtool. I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to set it all the way to the bottom. And I'm going to make it very large. We're going to set it to negative. And now we're going to cut. So this is really cool. So this is a little trick. So when it's all the way at the bottom, it's going to recognize all the subtools. And now we're going to actually scan through each one of our parts, and we're going to look for intersections that don't make any sense. If we run into an intersection that is between two subtools where they're supposed to join, i.e. what we've cut, then we know we're okay. But if there's a part of a subtool inside of it that is failing, then we need to fix that. Hey, what is happening? I'm doing really well. How are you doing? All right. So let's start. So if we turn on and we see how big our cube is, basically we wanted to make sure that this cube is as big as the print itself. With live Boolean, what we're going to do is we're going to start going down. And what I'm looking for are holes or gaps. I'm actually going to hold Alt, bring that down so it's a little bit closer. And kind of watch this as it's going through. This actually looks really clean. Come through. So we're looking to make sure that there's no white or no openings here. This is looking actually very clean. I'm happy with it. Okay, great. All that's looking nice. When you are seeing a little bit of these specks, that's okay. I'm going to show you how to go through and make sure. Now we're watching both the Master Sword and the Koroxy kind of cut. These look pretty nice. Flower 2. Come through. Now you have to kind of come through a little bit and watch. Just to make sure. It's looking pretty good. So you see here, there's an intersection that we've cut. That's okay. Gonna make sure. Same thing. We've cut that, so that's okay. Yep, that's looking pretty nice. Okay, we see an intersection where we've cut. Again, we're fine. There we go. All right, I would say that that's pretty successful. Pretty happy with that. And so with this, what we can do, let's rename this print checker, just so we know next time. But that way we knew it worked. Pretty happy with that. We can turn that off. We don't need it anymore. And yeah, let's go ahead and save it. All right. Okay. Now we just get to go through and make sure that everything is watertight as much as possible. There are a few ways to check this. One of the ways to do it is to go to transform and come down to analyze selected subtool. Mouthful for some reason. So analyze selected subtool, and we can do that for each one. But before we do that, because it will catch, if you have any particles that are floating somewhere in space that you can't see, it's going to flag it as not watertight because it's going to think that that little particle is supposed to be part of the subtool. So I go to solo, and what I do is I select the polygroups, and I go to to polygroups, and then I hit auto groups. Then I hold select rec, hold shift control tap, and then I swipe. And you see right now there is actually a few particles floating about that don't make any sense why they're there. So what you do is you make sure that you delete hidden. You just do this for each one. I'm going to come here. I'm going to hit auto groups. I'm going to select it. Drag. If it's not disappearing. What you could even do as well is you could just hold Control Shift drag and then hit Control Shift A. That will do the same thing. That one's okay. Auto groups. Grab this. That's fine. Or again, grab this. Yep, it's looking pretty good. Auto groups. Grab that. Nope, that one's fine. Auto groups. Grab that. Control Shift A. That one's fine as well. This one might be the crazy one. Auto groups. Oh yeah, I didn't actually merge him together yet. So let's do that. Let's click this guy. Let's select it. And then let's actually merge him completely together by using Dynamesh Master. Let's keep him at 0.2. Make sure all that gets merged correctly. Oh. Get rid of this one. We have this guy right here. And again, Dynamesh should fix a lot of this problem. That's why I like it. So we're going to go ahead and again, polygroups, auto groups, grab it, Control Shift A, these swipe. There are hidden particles. So delete hidden. There we go. All right. And then we know the checker's good, so we can get rid of the checker. We know the 1-inch scale. We'll keep that for reference. And everything else looks to be pretty good. Let's rename this so it's officially Korok Final. Final. I like to do final when everything is officially done. That way I know. Just my little OCD tendency. Base final, Master Sword final. Yay, turn everything on. We don't need the scale or that one tool. And there we go. So we have all of these parts. Control Shift X. Now we go ahead and save this. Now we're going to go ahead and decimate everything. Now for decimation, there's a few things we can do. Actually, before we do that, let's make sure we go over that detail that I was talking about. So I'm gonna hold up the brush, gonna hit C for contrast, and then I'm gonna go ahead and select contrast delta. So there's some areas of this Master Sword, for example, that I actually want to kind of stand out. So I'm just gonna kind of paint over some of these areas that I think will stick out a little bit. Or this is where Sculptress Pro will come in, where you can grab something like your damn standard, hit Sculptress Pro, and then we can actually kind of cut in some of the details that we think need to stand out a little bit. You can come through here. I think this little rust part will stand out a bit better. So let's come in there. So now we can start adding those final little bits of details that maybe we didn't see out the gate, but we think, oh yeah, that's gonna look good when I emphasize that a bit more. Just like that, especially since that's like a little rust spot. So this will combat some of those detail issues you might get when you print it and you notice that things will get lost. You always want to aim for cutting deeper than expected when you're talking about 3D printing something, just for this very reason. And if you want to get really, really into it, you can even make sure that you create a morph target so that you can create some pretty nice lines. Also going to grab the orb brush. I have a bunch of orb cracks and stuff that I like to use. Go ahead and actually increase that just a bit. Yeah, that'll help emphasize a bit better. So this is what you would want to do. You can maybe drop the intensity down just a little bit. Another thing you can do as well, if you really just want an overall boost, you can actually come here to Deformation, Contrast, and maybe kick that up like 10% or so. Just be careful when you do that. The edges sometimes might actually, like right here, see how this like overlap right here kind of busted the model. So be careful if you do that. Since this is a gym, I want that to be kind of clean. But everything else, like right around here, needs to be a little bit more rusty. Because that's a gym. Can't break my gym. Cut that up. There we go. Kind of go through and just make sure it all looks pretty good. Also, contrast might break your key a little bit, so definitely be careful there. Come through and just start adding some of this really cool detail. Or even stuff like this. Come up here. Come down with like the clay brush. Kind of cut in some spots there. Anything that looks like might stand out to you. But this way you'll get nice detail that gets stuck. That might get lost, not stuck. Oop, there you go. Now these jagged edges here, I'm okay with that. I'm going for a kind of rustic, you know, torn blade. And a lot of these steps, if they bother you, go ahead and feel free to get rid of it. There's ways you can do that. You can take your H polish if you want, and then you can turn on backface and try to clean some of that up. I don't mind that so much, just because I think it's going to be small enough it won't really matter too much, but that's just an opinion on that piece. It's already kind of a broken, battered sword, so I don't think it's going to make that much of a difference. So I'm okay with it. Some of those rust spots. This part gets hidden a little bit, so I'm okay with that looking like that. Again, it's really up to you. You get to just kind of decide whatever works for you, whatever works well for the vibe you're going for. There we go. Okay. Perfect. These cuts are very, very deep already. I don't think we're going to lose too much detail. We might lose a little detail like right in here. But that also is kind of part of the look. But we can emphasize that. We just like the damn standard, and we're just kind of tracing along a little bit. Or again, let's go back to that contrast. We can kind of paint. Bring some of that back. I think I freaked out ZBrush. Oh, I did. Might have broke it. Let's wait patiently. Whenever you get this little blue wheel or, you know, Mac's little wheel, just don't rush it. Takes a minute. Okay. Okay. Do you guys have any questions on 3D printing prep or ZBrush questions in general? Feel free to let me know. Come on. Might have broke it. Okay, I'm going to wait for the program to respond. Sometimes that helps. I think I might have done too much too fast. I had Sculptress on when I turned on contrast. But that's why we save. If I broke it, I broke it. I think I broke it. No. Fine. Close it. It's fine. Anatomy chart. The questions have been pretty good tonight, though. Yeah, the questions have been great. I've loved the questions so far. Yeah, but that's why we saved. It's okay. Yeah. And let's see here. Recovered tool. This is where... Let's see where we last left off. Hey, that's not too bad. We can actually compare that. Let's go to load tool. Sometimes we can just compare. Oh yeah. And not too bad. The recover tool worked out pretty well. That's my fault though. I made the mistake. I put Sculptress Pro on top of contrast. You don't want to do that. All right. So now we're pretty happy with this, right? So let's go ahead and check for the final steps. Okay, let's check the final steps. What we'll do real quick is let's see where this saved. Let's go polygroups, auto groups. Aha. Okay. Let me see something real quick. I think I saved after that part. Yeah, I did save after that part. So the save subtool, it's been a while. Been a while, but so we actually want to get rid of this version. Let's go here. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we're actually going to check to make sure that this is watertight like we wanted it to be. So let's go ahead and go to transform, hit analyze, select the subtool, pick the millimeter that it is, and it says it's not watertight, which is no bueno. So let's go to geometry, modify topology. Let's weld points and close holes. There we go. That actually thought for a second. and now we are watertight. So a lot of times that's all it takes is to analyze it, make sure it's watertight. It says it's not watertight. Just go to Modify Topology, weld points, close holes, try again. 9 times out of 10, that will solve your problem. Been a while. All right, let's go ahead and select the next one. I'm gonna do the exact same thing. I'm just gonna go ahead and weld points, close holes, transform, analyze, pick it, watertight, perfect. Just go through each one of these. Weld points, close holes, transform, select, pick your point, watertight. That's how you do it. This is how you do it. Weld points, close holes, analyze, select it, watertight. At the end of the day, this is all we need to do. Oh, I don't need to save it though. And if you want, if your client requests a watertight verification, I don't know why else we would actually save it. But analyze, select, watertight. So if you want to save this information out, you can. I never do. I just look for that watertight method. Now I do save this 1-inch cube for scale, and here's why. When I make something printable, this 1-inch cube, if I export it out and it exports out too large or too small, I can't tell you exactly how much that is. So the 1-inch scale, I keep that. I export that out as the STL. Then I check that with my slicer. And if this cube comes in at 1 inch, everything else is right on the money. Thanks. Yeah. All right. So we're good to go there. So that's that portion. Let's go ahead and save this one more time. Now we're going to decimate everything. I don't decimate all subtools at once. That's way too much processing power. So what I do is I go save as, and then we're going to go, it's going to be 0, 1, decimation. Go ahead and hit save. I'm now just going to go ahead, let's pin Z plugin on this side. Let's go to decimation master. Now, unless you want to keep your poly paint for whatever reason, like you're trying to bring it into a render engine, you can keep UVs, use and keep poly paint, but I typically don't do that. So all I'm going to do is come right down here to these presets. I'm going to make sure I turn on my wireframe again. And then all I do is hit this 250K. That's going to wipe all your poly paint and stuff out. That preset is very specific. But this 250K is such a great preset. You barely lose any detail, if none at all. And it's just a nice way to keep everything under that 500,000 marker and have a good subtool that goes in nice. Let's go through. Takes a bit. As it thinks, as it thinks. So while this is thinking, if you've made it this far, if you hung out with me for this long, thank you so much for being here. Don't forget, if you're not already, to subscribe to Twitch and YouTube on Pixologic, so that way you know when we go live. If you're not already, really appreciate it. All right, there we go. So we can go ahead and take a look, and we can see that this is the before. This is the after. Before, after. Very little detail loss. Such a great way to do that. So we're just going to repeat this process with everything. 250. Just let that go. Thanks. And remember, guys, I'm going to be giving this away after everything. So I want you guys to have it on me. Oh, you just followed me on Instagram as well. Awesome stuff. Thank you so much. And this is where you guys are going to catch me for a while. On my own personal channels, I am not going to be able to stream that often, but I do want to increase my YouTube. If you guys haven't checked out my YouTube, please pop over there and subscribe, because I'm going to be doing more of that. Because I think my channel is pretty decent. So make sure you pop over to my YouTube and hit subscribe, and then I'm going to be creating new videos there as well, and I'll announce when this goes officially live. All right, so that's 250, and again, Look at that detail. It just stays. It's beautiful. Now, here's the interesting part. This one right here is above the 500,000 mark, but it's 750. But then the bulbs itself are actually decent size. So sometimes too, I won't even decimate if I don't need to. The stem, I'll actually I'll leave that stem alone. I'll leave that alone. This is 1.2 million. I will actually decimate this though. So when I get this prepped right now, I'm going to export it all out. And then I'm going to basically create a link for people to go to and just download it. So I won't be able to test print it myself, but if anybody here would love to test print it, hop in on my Discord, which that link will take you there. That's where I'll release the file first. And then after that, I'll have just a link for people to go to. My Discord is just basically a community of artists who like to come hang out with each other and help each other. So it's very casual, very kickback. No pressure. All right, so there's this right here. Let's go through. All right, let's save it because we haven't saved it in a while. And we all learned what happened when I start doing things. So let's go ahead and drop this one. But yeah, my plan is to basically increase my YouTube videos. And my YouTube stuff will be basically like tips and tricks on how to get stuff done in ZBrush quickly. So if you guys are interested in that, let me know. But, all right, there we go. So there you go. Look at that. It's looking really nice. We can solo that. Okay, and then the cube doesn't need to get... So in total, the whole project is almost 2 million polys, and we're good to go. Now, export. How do we do that? Always got to learn more ZBrush. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Now we're going to export. So we're going to go back over to Z plugin. We're going to go back to this 1-inch cube because, again, we want to stay consistent with our scale. We're going to go back down to Scale Master. And because we had a crash, the scale scene tends to repeat itself. I mean, reset itself. Not repeat, reset. So we're going to hit set scene scale. Wow, couldn't speak. And you can see here it remembered what it was. So we're going to click that. And then we're going to go up to 3D Print Hub. And we're going to say update size ratios. You want to do this even though it says it's 25.4 millimeter. You want to do this because I basically have had it export out too large or too small. So I update that and make sure that it is set to the 25.4 millimeter. Just me being overly cautious. Then I go ahead and go export to STL. And then I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder and call this the Master Sword. Printable statue. Boop. Enter that, and then I'm going to hit save. And then I took the time to rename all my subtools. So I'm going to pick choice 2, which is use the subtool name as the file name, which is always a great way to do it. So I'm going to hit that. It'll go through, take its time, and export stuff. Files were exported successfully. So what we'll do is we'll pop open. We'll actually go to our Master Sword. We'll go to our folder, printable statue, and 1-inch cube. Perfect. Base, Korok final. This is the actual name, the very first one. We don't need that, so we can delete it. So we have the Master Sword, Korok, base, final, Silent Princess, stem, bulb, and top flower. Perfect. The only thing left to do would be to verify it in any slicer and then set it to print. So, in a nutshell, guys, that's how you prep for 3D print. Let's go ahead and save this one more time so we have it and we are good to go. Now, if you did want to come back and add detail and things didn't come out exactly how you wanted it to, that's where Sculptris Pro really comes in. You can come back, you can make that detail, and then you can re-export it. No need to go through all that extra work. So, was it 7:40? Woo! Almost took the full 3 hours. Nice. Hey, Mrs. Wildfire. Hey, and I've been here lurking, but wanted to make sure I got to wish you good luck on your new job tomorrow. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm really, really excited. I can't wait. And now the 12-hour print stream. Right, yeah. That's gonna, oh my gosh, that's gonna be crazy. So, but anyway, okay. Do you guys have any 3D printing questions? I figured last 20 minutes we could just take some questions and make sure if you guys have anything specific that maybe I rushed over, let me know. The thing I wanted to sculpt, if we had enough time, and I could start it, I could start the block out, is I wanted to do a T-Rex bust. Oop. But let's save one more time. All right. Let's do a T-Rex bust while we wait for questions to pile in. So let's take this and let's make Polymesh 3D. And I'm gonna have my reference. Yeah, let me guys know if you have any questions. In fact, actually, before we do that, real quick, let me see something real fast. Let's go back to the Master Sword look, because I'm going to basically package this up real quick, and then I'm going to drop this off in a way for people to download tonight so you guys can test print it. I would love to see you guys. If you guys print it, do me a favor, please, please, please. Tag Pixologic and tag me on Instagram or on Twitter that you printed it out, because I would love to see it. So I usually don't release files that are not 100% test printed, but I'm confident in my work and it seems to be pretty good. So if anybody, so just know that's the only downside, is that I didn't test print it. Let's go ahead and bake this real quick. Do you create a shell or print a solid? So I keep my prints solid because I like to cut the shells out in the slicer. I generally will not do cutting, shelling in ZBrush because I feel like I have better control of that in the slicer. Because if I want to scale it up, and we touched on this earlier, if I want to scale it up or scale it down, if the part is solid, then you have a little bit more leeway to scale down or to scale up. But if you shell something and then you try to scale it down, that wall thickness will get too thin and possibly break, or it'll become thicker and heavier. So so for me, I keep things solid and then I hollow them out in a slicer. There is a time, however, in fact, such a great question that I'm going to explain a little bit further. Let me pull up a older file of my Chun-Li versus Vega, because I did shell in ZBrush for a very specific reason, and I want you guys to know why I did that. So let's go to... Yeah, where'd you put it, dude? Back up. 2021. Yes, 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 yes. Here it is, Vega versus Chun-Li. Vega versus Chun-Li, 3D print. Okay. Final. Let's open this up and let's talk about it. I'm waiting on more resin, then I definitely will. Nice. Okay. So, we can do a little bit of a show and tell. But right here, so first things first, here's all the pieces of this print in particular. Now, let's talk about this for just a second. So I shelled this piece right here. I'm going to go ahead and turn on display properties. Turn double off for a second. Actually, turn it on. Okay. This one piece I shelled inside a ZBrush. And the reason why is for weight control. So I'll kind of pull up the physical, and then I'll break it down in ZBrush itself. Oh, I don't have a full one. Come on, dude. Okay. Realize I had to reset everything and I don't have it all set up. All right, so let's talk about this for a second. So the reason why I hollowed this out in ZBrush is because I needed to control the weight of the model so that it would actually stand. If we take a look at the print in full size, I'm going to do that real quick. If we go to my art station, and then you come on over to my Chun-Li versus Vega, and you scroll on down, all the way to the bottom where it's printed. So the thing to remember is that this is actually, she's hanging off of his face, right? Like she's literally, her whole body is over here. Well, there's a tipping point where things become too heavy. And while the center of gravity is somewhere about here in the middle, the weight of her extends beyond that to a point where I wasn't sure if there was enough weight here to counter that, or on this side, because we want that weight. So what I ended up doing was I hollowed this out in ZBrush so that I could ensure that the rest of her was light enough to actually support the weight coming in this direction. That's the only time you would see me do that, because, again, I wanted this dynamic approach where it's really like, this is the weight of it, you know? And so I wanted everything to be balanced within this area, and I wanted that weight to be distributed evenly in this direction. So having it hollowed allowed me to control that. That being said, here's the problem. This model is about 12 inches, almost a foot tall. Maybe a little shy than that. Maybe it's like 10 inches. The problem is that if you were to want to print this smaller, can't do that. I'd have to come back in here. I'd have to actually get rid of the inside hollowness. I'd actually have to break this part out, clean it up, and then make it solid. But I knew how big this was, that it was just not going to print well solid. I needed to control that weight, so that's where we did. And that's the time I recommend that you shell in ZBrush. Outside of that, you don't really need to. You could just take your whole part, have it solid. You can hollow it in your slicer, and that way you have control. So if you want to make a smaller print or a larger print, you get a little bit more leeway. How did you explode the controls? Oh, if you hit Shift X, it sends it up for expose. Also, if you have normal ZBrush layout, it's here on the side. I believe it's also under transform. Yep, right here, expose. There's a little button right here, transpose, and then expose. Just Shift X is the control. So that's where I would go with that. So keep it solid. I guess it's a long way of just saying keep it solid. So you don't even hollow your prints normally. No, not typically, unless I'm in the slicer itself. Yeah. Why worry about weights? 3D printers can print supports, can't they? Oh, it's not about the weight of the print while it's printing. It's about the weight of the model when it's standing on its own. So this is kind of approaching on that anti-gravity base. If some of you have heard, or I don't know if some of you have heard what that looks like, but for gravity 3D prints. So with anti-gravity prints, it's when things look like they should be balanced and there's like a hidden gem to them. And there's a lot of 3D prints that hit that way. A lot of collectibles will do that, where they'll like hide the keys and make it look like the print is falling or in motion when it's not. It's the same thing here. I wanted her to look like she's in motion. So it wasn't about whether or not it will print and the supports in the printer will hold it. It was about when I put the model together, will this stand on its own or will it fall over? So you do have to keep in mind that when you're printing your prints, that the center of gravity allows it to stand on its own, or else it's a failed print technically. Yeah, you would want the base solid, more stable than on top. Absolutely, yep. So, but it's a great question, Ted, because I think that's something that is generally overlooked in the beginning, especially when learning about making stuff for 3D printing, is that a lot of times we just think, oh, we printed it, it's now functional, it should stand. That's not always the case. Most of the time in the beginning, it will be, but then when you start trying to create like statues in motion, you gotta have to start playing with some of these tricks. And it is worth noting that in the manufacturing business, sometimes there are tricks where you'll put like a steel rod through your character that will hold up and make something look, make it look like it's doing something super dynamic, but it's actually controlled with, you know, a weighted rod or some sort of a different material other than resin or FDM. So, oh hey, next Knox. I didn't say hi before. Hello. So yeah, so there are tricks in manufacturing and there are tricks in printing. 9 times out of 10, you want to make sure when you're printing something that you kind of either adhere to what I would call the triangle theory, where you have 3 points of connection and they all fall within that, you know, 50, 60 degree angle that will kind of support itself when it's together. The other thing too I did was I created a giant key to also counteract that weight going into his body. Knowing that I was, you know, and it's hard to see, sorry, because I don't have a big display, but it comes off. Like, it's not, I know it's hard to see because of the small, my full frame got messed up. But it actually sits right inside. Let me see if I can fix that. Give me 1 second. Let's see here. Go in there. Let me just add in my camera real quick. I want you guys to see it large. Yeah, say fine. There we go. Say okay. Okay. So don't mind the large me, but it balances on its own. It's not even glued in because the key is large, that it slides right in, and then the way that's angled into the body helps support, and it's that triangle shape that helps support it into the figure, allowing it to stand on its own without actually needing anything else other than just being placed. So it's a little bit of engineering to make sure that the weight is distributed evenly amongst the print itself. But when you have a running pose or something too, and there is only 1 foot on the ground, snap your key. You've done that. Yeah, you've done that. I've done it. It sucks. Yeah. Thanks, Ted. Yeah, so that's what I mean. So it's all about just weight distributing your weight distribution. Here we go. All over the place today. It's all about weight distribution and making sure that it fits. And this is the best example that I have of it. So that's what I mean by making sure. My webcam froze. Oh, it did. No! What the heck? Go figure. Well, luckily we're at the end of the stream. Is that piece FDM? That piece is both resin and FDM. Let me see if I can fix my webcam here. Hold on. Let's get rid of that. Say, yep, remove that scene. 1 second. Go back here. Second. Say okay. I think I broke it, guys. I'm having all sorts of computer stuff today. All right. Well, luckily you can see ZBrush. So let me see. If I turn it off, Here, hold on. Let's try it one more time. Let's go video. Try this real quick. I think I can fix it. I think I can. I think I can. How about now? There we go. Loose steel. There it goes. All right, it's fixed now. There he is. Yeah. All right. So, any last minute questions about 3D printing? Because that is a wrap. So, maybe we'll sculpt a T-Rex next week. That might be really fun. But yeah, do you guys have any final questions? Thanks for the stream. I learned a lot. Not a problem, Ted. I'm glad to be so helpful to you guys. And again, like I said, for those of you who are used to seeing me in my own personal stream, that's kind of being put on pause for now. But I will be coming up with more YouTube tutorials. Promise it will happen. So please feel free to join my Discord. All that good stuff. I'll drop the link one more time. Wherever it is in the world. Just to make sure. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop or provide a link in my Discord right now to make sure that you guys have... So in the next hour, it will be available in my Discord. Go in there. You'll be able to download the Master Sword. Print it yourself. Have fun. I'll make an announcement on Twitter. And then tag me in it. Tag Pixologic and tag me in it. I would greatly appreciate that. But I just really wanted to just say thank you guys for accepting me here. It's been amazing. And I have so much more to want to show you guys. And so I'm really, really excited. Do you always cut your models into pieces? I feel like leaving it in one giant piece can take hours and hours to print than separating them into pieces. Yes, I do, Dan. I do keep them. I do separate them most of the time. There are a few occasions that I'll leave a print solid, which generally just meant I was lazy that day. But it's great practice. I highly recommend keeping everything broken up into pieces for two reasons. One, it's going to showcase if you're trying to get a job in the industry, especially for toys, that you at least understand how to break up your model into pieces that are manageable and also look good. But then also, it's going to allow you to print bigger so that if you have a smaller machine like I do, I have the Epax X1 and I have the Ender 3 Pro. When I want to print in resin, I'm limited to size. So if you have a smaller printer like I do, then having the pieces in multiple pieces, or having your model in multiple pieces, will allow you to print it bigger, because then you can have much larger. So, yeah. What section in the Discord will you drop the sword? I will drop it in probably 3D print. That makes the most sense, I think. I will drop it in the 3D printer stuff. That will be the channel I drop it on. Yeah. Okay, I'm back. Yeah, Chris. Well, we are wrapping it up for the day. Let's see. Minimizes risk of master fail print too. Absolutely, Matt. That's a great call out. Yep. Hey, from Brazil. How you doing? So, all right, guys. Well, with that being said, unless last chance for final questions. Thanks for all the tips, and looking forward to future streams. Heck yeah. Well, this is where I'm going to be streaming mainly from now on. So, reminder, guys, make sure to subscribe to YouTube, follow on Twitch. Follow on Twitch, like on Facebook, and then also to just make sure that 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. That's where I'll be every Sunday. And layer shifts. Oh my gosh, Ryan, you're giving me nightmares. Layer shifts. All right, everybody. Take it easy. Have a good one. And I'll see you next weekend. Bye, 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 bye.